Everybody talks about burnout, but it always kind of just leads to the same advice, like take some time to relax, don't be so hard on yourself, slow down. And there's a pretty big problem with this. And sure, that advice is well intentioned, but if people don't understand what you're actually going through, it's misguided at best. I went through this for about 5 years while growing my first business, just burning out again and again and again, and it was driving me insane. And the reason this advice doesn't work is exactly that. The people giving you this advice often don't understand what ambitious burnout feels like, so they can't actually give you advice that solves the problem. So in this video, I'm going to share with you what's actually happening when ambitious people burn out, as well as what I learned going through it myself, so you can finally break out of this cycle like I did. Because ambitious burnout isn't usually caused by working too hard. It's caused by the psychological loop that people fall into when their expectations, their identity, and their outcomes all get tangled together. So I'm going to walk you through what that looks like, why it happens, as well as how to actually break out of it. So let's start with the burnout loop itself. What kind of happens? What does this look like? If you're an ambitious person and you keep burning out, generally speaking, it starts with you having high expectations of yourself. You have big goals, you have high standards, and you have a strong desire to succeed. So you want a lot, you're putting a lot into it, and you expect a lot out of yourself. What inevitably happens, though, is you experience slow or inconsistent results. So progress feels slower than expected, and you start questioning yourself. Am I good enough for this? These kinds of questions. Why are so many people so much further ahead of me? All these questions. Now you're operating from a place of you're kind of like desperately clawing, to succeed. And so the pressure on yourself increases because your identity is tied to your results. So you start approaching your work with this has to work energy, and you're like fighting and clawing at anything you can to force this thing to work. But what this leads to is the next piece, which is mental exhaustion. So it's constantly thinking, again, the questioning of yourself, so on and so forth, the overworking and the frustration, and over time this leads to burnout. So what do people do? Oh, take some time off, relax. What I used to do was every 90 to 120 days, I would burn out, and then I would take 4 to 9 days off from my business. I'd take like a full week, Saturday through till the next Sunday off, or I would take a long weekend. And then I would come back and I would push even harder, and that's what so many people do. But then the loop just repeats itself. So for a long time, I was just burning out every 90 to 120 days because I thought I'm just pushing myself to my maximum capacity, and this is what I'm capable of handling right now. But the thing is, burnout usually isn't from effort. It's from effort mixed with this pressure as well as your identity, which is really interesting. So why do ambitious people fall into this loop? There are really 4 causes that I want to touch on here. The first one is expectations. Now, I already kind of touched on expectations, but ambitious people expect progress quickly, and oftentimes they expect things to be easy and come easily to them. Like for me in school was always easy for me, but going into the business world, things were not just like this, where I'd pick anything up and it was all magical and beautiful and perfect from day one. Because there's no guidebook saying here's how to build this exact business that you're trying to build from scratch. And so real progress often takes longer than expected. And this gap in your expectations, like the expectations versus reality, that's where a lot of pressure comes from, right? All that pressure goes on you. The second cause is outcome obsession. This was a really big one for me. When all of your focus is on revenue, growth, success, whatever your goals may be, what happens is your brain constantly feels like you're not there yet. And that creates this constant internal tension to where I would have physical tension in my body all the time. Now, the third cause is misaligned work. And this one is kind of overlooked by a lot of people. Sometimes you're working very hard, but you're working on the entirely wrong thing. It's not aligned with who you are as a person, or you're going in the wrong direction. You're shutting out your intuition. That was something I was doing, and just trying to brute force something even though it just didn't feel like the right thing to do. Having wrong priorities or having an unclear strategy. This oftentimes will drain you instead of energizing you, which is what we all want our work to do. And we all know that our work can energize us at times. So how do we do that more, right? And really part of that answer is to make sure your work is better aligned with who you are, easier said than done. The fourth thing is identity pressure, and this is a big one. When your self-worth becomes tied to your success and your outcomes, every slow week, every time you try something and it doesn't work, it's a hit to your identity and who you believe you are as a person. And this can rapidly diminish your confidence and just throw you down a horrible spiral that can take years to get out of, speaking from experience. And this really drains your motivation and just burns all of your emotional energy, and it slows you down. All these things just slow you down. So sure, fixing these things can make you feel better, and it does make you feel significantly better, but you become more lightweight. You don't have to work or push as hard, and you move significantly faster as a result when all of these things are sorted. So what's the fix? How do you break out of this loop? You don't fix burnout by just working less or slowing down. You fix it by changing the conditions that create or cause burnout in the first place. These are the 4 things I talked about: releasing outcome pressure, aligning your work, narrowing your focus, I'll get into what that means in a second, and expanding your identity. So what do these things mean exactly, and how do you do them, more importantly? Because a lot of us know things like, well, I need to let go of outcomes, but how? What I've found works really well for releasing the outcome pressure is to just simply focus on what's the one single next thing for me to work on. So the single next step, next decision, next improvement. There was a lot of internal resistance for me at first when I intuitively thought that this is what I should have been doing. And I didn't want to do it because it felt too simple, too obvious. There was some resistance that made me not want to do this. But this is more important to focus on, just taking the one next step. It can be kind of humbling too, instead of focusing on where you should be, why you're not there yet, and this massive gap in your expectations. The second thing, aligning your work. So this has to do with asking a lot of questions to yourself, like, is this actually the right thing to be doing? Is this the highest leverage activity to be working on right now? Because burnout often disappears when you're, riding a wave, so to say, instead of fighting the waves. In terms of narrowing your focus, instead of thinking about every single thing you want to accomplish and focusing on everything that's going to get you to whatever your goal is and all the different things you have to do, that's very overwhelming. Just focus on the one next thing, because when you stop carrying all of that stuff in your head, that's a lot less that you have to fight mentally in order to move forward. And then expanding your identity is really interesting, because I used to be really one-dimensional and business was all I did and all I had, basically. And slow progress feels devastating when your entire identity rides on one thing, on this one thing that you're focused on. So putting more energy into your relationships, your health, hobbies, things like that. Here's the thing. People will say oh, you need more balance in your life. And I totally agree that, it's important to not just take that advice blindly and just have balance and work less for no reason. If you're ambitious, go for it. But my point is more that I found when I have multiple things going on, if something in my business isn't quite going to plan, there are other things I can focus on and make progress in, because that part of my identity is somebody who makes rapid progress in things. So it doesn't just have to be the one thing that you're focusing on, especially if you're going through a slower period or adjusting or doing a pullback, meaning you're making a big pivot, for example, and you kind of have to restart some stuff. Doing this protects your psychology, I've found. So the big reframe here is success is much less about pushing harder and much more about not quitting. And the people who don't quit are the ones who have kind of a structure that helps them prevent burnout from happening in the first place. So if you're somebody who's ambitious but keeps getting stuck in these kind of mental loops, like the burnout loops and these kinds of things, that's actually what I help people work through. I help people install the psychological rules that make progress sustainable in order to become successful in whatever it is that you're trying to do. For me, it was business that really kind of threw me into this journey. That way you can keep moving forward at a significantly faster rate without burning out, without feeling so bogged down and drained all the time. So if you do want to learn more about that, you can check out the link in the description. But otherwise, I hope this was helpful for you and it helped you understand why ambitious burnout happens, as well as some things you can do about it.